Welcome to the Pump Take Sports Show. Today we are talking about our favorite team, the Toronto Raptors. God bless them. The East is getting a lot better. There's a few things this video is going to be a loose video. It's going to be a discussion video for the most part, just about how our Raptors are looking for the upcoming season. You could call it a season preview. That's probably what the title will say below this video, but season preview of it. So there's a few things that we can just kind of chat about. One being that the East is getting a lot better. The East used to be kind of the joke to the West, but honestly, like the top of the East could really compete with some of those top West teams. Then you have that the Raptors are not only staying competitive this year, but we're maintaining flexibility for next season to like bring in a max player like Giannis or something like that, and then kind of have a, just kind of where we think the Raptors are going to fall in the standings. And then we'll end the video off with all of us saying who we think our MVP Raptor will be this season and our MIP Raptor will be this season. So most improved player on the Raptors. So does anyone want to kind of just start the discussion at any point?
Yeah, sure. I'll start off with just talking about just the Eastern Conference in general. Like, as much as I'm optimistic that I hope that we can sign a big free agent next offseason, we're entering choppy waters a little bit. The Eastern Conference, as I'm sure you all know, is getting so much better very, very quickly. Milwaukee is already very good. I think the Celtics are going to improve a lot next season and in the years to come and become one of the top teams in the conference. You have the Heat, you have the Sixers, you obviously have the Nets, who are being talked about a lot right now. Even teams like the Bulls are on the right track. Like they fired shitty Jim Boylan to like get a new coach. So like I guess my concern with the Raptors is that there's a lot of other teams in this conference that are moving on a very quick upward trajectory. And I feel like we've won our championship. A few guys have now left that team that were like outside of Kawhi. And we're riding this plateau that's still kind of trying to climb up. But like, I guess the question I have, and this will really depend on how our players perform next season and just like how we see what assets we actually end up with in like 2 years, where this team is going to be in like 5 years is what my question is regarding this.
Yeah, I think going into this season, the Raptors have actually taken a bit of a step back. Whereas, like what Kale mentioned, like a lot of those teams, like the Celtics and the Heat and the Sixers, are all kind of headed in the right direction and heading in an upward trajectory. I think the loss of Ibaka and Gasol is going to hurt the Raptors a lot, and Aaron Baines and Alex Len are not going to fill that void, I think, to allow the Raptors to sort of really be a top end contender in the Eastern Conference. So I think the Raptors will probably finish maybe even fifth or sixth in the conference this year. I think it'll be a bit of a transition year, but again, hopefully going into next offseason, the Raptors will still be able to use that high of their championship to sort of attract a big name free agent to come over here and kind of save us and send us in the right trajectory once again. But
yeah, I think when we're talking about kind of like the Raptors placing and where they're going to kind of end up in the East this year, obviously I agree with like what you're saying, Kale, about kind of how we haven't taken steps as many other Eastern Conference teams have. That being said, though, maybe it's just me being too optimistic, but we still do have our like main core. Like, you take away Serge, that's obviously a loss. There's no two ways to split that. We still have Lowry, who is like, probably easily a top 10 point guard in the NBA. We still have Fred, we still have OG, and we still have Siakam. We still have Powell. Like there are a lot of really good players still on this team that I think obviously we're not going to be up there with the Milwaukees or the Brooklyn Nets, but there's no reason why we can't be better than the Pacers this year. Mm-hmm. There's no reason why we can't be better than I don't know, who's another like mid-seed like Eastern Conference team. Like we will be better than the Magic. There's no question about that. But I'm talking about the guys who
like the Sixers, maybe.
Yeah, the Sixers. I think the Raptors will be better than the Sixers. I think we'll win more games. Because, like, yes, the Sixers have the star power over us, but there's something about how Toronto plays that kind of like that whole unit together. It just wins basketball games. Like we've won 50 plus games the last few years now, and like I know losing Serge is obviously very unfortunate, but there's no reason why I don't think we can win in 50 games this year, honestly.
Yeah. Go ahead. Just to get my we were talking a little bit about this before. I lean more towards the pessimistic side of the Raptors this season, in terms of our outlook, but that's just for this season. I do think, as good as we were saying the East is, and they like the Nets just getting KD and Kyrie healthy, like that is a huge, huge addition to this conference. But you look at the West, and we're still nowhere near as deep as the West. Like they're like you legitimately can't even try and project the 8 teams that are going to make the playoffs in the West competing for those last few spots. Whereas I agree with you, Jake. I think that the Raptors are a step above some of those teams, like the Hawks, like a significant step above those teams that are going to be scrapping it out for the last few, like even the Wizards with Westbrook and Beal now together. But with that being said, I still think we're missing that X factor that is going to make us compete with those higher end teams that I think we're kind of gearing towards with the way we've set up the contracts that we signed this offseason, that we're going to be gearing towards next season, getting back into that realm. But with that being said, I still think you can't really underestimate the Raptors and their culture. Like everyone said last year before the season that we weren't going to be Kawhi. We weren't we still made it very far in the playoffs, all things considered. And we could have beaten the Celtics. We were close to doing. You still can't count us out, but I'm not gonna be predicting a trip to the finals or anything this year.
Yeah, just to build on what you were saying, Aiden, like I think that like that star power that we've just seen it just throughout, especially where the NBA is going now, that it's like it's that X factor that you need to actually like win a championship. You can compose a talented roster, which we undoubtedly have, and win 50 games and finish from 3 to 5 in the Eastern Conference every single year, undoubtedly, and that's great. But to actually win and to make a deep playoff run and beat those top tier teams, you need to have that kind of like that elite star talent. And I guess I don't know whether I'm optimistic or pessimistic about the Raptors' outlook. I'm a little bit in the middle because on one hand, we still have very good young players, and Siakam, I think, is going to rebound a lot. We have OG. Fred is locked up for a little bit. Terrence Davis, we don't know what's going to happen with him, but he showed a lot of promise. We have a nice young core. But I guess the question that I ask is where does that star power come from? Because now we've paid Siakam a max contract to be that star guy. But there's still questions on whether or not he can do that. And when we're looking towards the free agents in summer 2021, like there's guys like there's so many players available. Lowry's contract is up then as well, so we don't know what's going to happen with that. But there's Giannis, Kawhi is a free agent, DeRozan is a free agent again. We have Oladipo, Drew Holiday, even like lower end guys like Jonathan Isaac. But I don't know if I like that it seems like it's going to be an organizational plan to wait for 2021 and bank on getting one of those guys versus just planning for the future right now.
Yeah, and if I can add something as well, it's that our young players still have a lot of ways to go in their development, but that's a good thing. Considering how well we've been playing lately and like with our guys who, bro, look at OG. If you were to tell me OG back like 3 years ago was going to be what he is now, like taking like playoff corner, obviously the playoff corner buzzer beater was let, but like there are other examples of like OG just being the guy and stepping up in situations where, bro, you could argue in some games OG is more vital to the team than Siakam is. You could argue that.
Absolutely.
The way that OG locks mans down and like completely shuts down like their best player.
OG is legitimately like a top wing defender in the league.
Is.
Like I'm not even being a homer here. He is one of the top wing defenders in the league. That's what he's developed into.
He absolutely is. And that's the exciting thing about the Raptors is that when you look at teams kind of like what's an example? Like, anyway, I'll skip the example because I can't think of one off the top of my head. But what I'm saying is that OG has so much more to go. And like, I'm going to talk about this a little bit. I'm just going to spoil it. OG is my most improved Raptor this year. But like OG, if he takes massive steps in like shooting off the dribble, like creating his own shots, he's literally going to be like as Aiden already said, he's one of the best like wing defenders in the whole NBA. He can only get better from here. And he's not a drama queen. He's a Raptor that like buys into our culture and is quiet and works hard. And it's the exact same thing with Siakam. It's the exact same thing. Look at Fred. Fred signed a 4-year deal, which we kind of got him on, honestly, kind of a bargain. And he's just going to like lead those two. It's really those 3 guys and Lowry. And like Lowry is going to take less money than what he's probably worth, because we paid him that 1-year extension worth $31 million, which is too much for Lowry. But Lowry is like, he's going to say, okay, I'll take a team-friendly deal to help the team move into the next generation of Raptors basketball. It's very exciting, the young guys we have, man. Like, even Siakam paying him sorry, I'm rambling. I'll end it on this, though. Even Siakam taking the max contract, Siakam still has a lot of ways to go, but in a good way. Siakam's a great basketball player. Yeah, he had a really bad playoff series, but he knows that. He came out in an interview and said, I couldn't even recognize myself out there. I didn't know what I was doing out there. I wasn't.
Yeah, that's not who he is.
That's not who he is. No, that's exactly right. That's not who he is. Siakam at his best is a maxable player in today's NBA. And like the amount of like space that he can still develop is exceptionally high.
Yeah.
And during the regular season, he proved that too, that he can be that guy. It's just in the playoffs, he kind of lost himself, which, I mean, under the circumstances, you know, they had just had like, they'd been sitting for, what was it, like 2 months before the bubble. And then now they're in the bubble, which is a completely unrecognizable atmosphere for basketball. I mean, I guess you could use that excuse for everyone, but it affects everybody differently, right? I don't think that's necessarily a good representation of the type of basketball player that Pascal Siakam is, because what he's proven to the Raptors throughout his entire career has been that he can be that max guy.
And I know that I was just earlier saying that based on what I saw in the bubble, I have my doubts about if Siakam can actually be not just a max guy who's worth like $1 value in the free agency market, but actually that guy who pushes us to winning like deep playoff series. But one thing that I think is encouraging with what we were seeing in Siakam, and this sounds a little bit weird because he played very poorly in the bubble, but a lot of the reason that he was playing so poorly was that his decision-making on the offensive end was like, it was just absolutely just out the window. But the encouraging thing about that is that it was not a case of this guy doesn't have the raw talent and he's on a max contract. The raw talent is undoubtedly there. It's more just IQ and just fast-paced decision-making that needs to develop. And I think that's just part of a learning curve with like a young guy who's like, last season was his first season kind of trying to step into that role on the team. So I think a lot of our future success is going to hinge on Siakam being able to just step into that role in pressure situations.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was going to say this when we got into like our MVPs and MIPs for the team, but I'll just say it now. Like, I think if this team in its current how it exists currently is going to make a impact in the playoffs, it's going to be because Siakam is our best player, I think. And I don't think that's going to happen this year. Like I said, I'm a little bit pessimistic. Like, I don't think we have the interior defense, especially at the center position, to you know, like I said off air before, I was saying this to Jake and that I think we could. It's a big question how we're going to defend Joel Embiid, and if you know that ends up being a series. But just to avoid rambling here, I guess what I'm trying to say is I do think there's a lot of pieces, like Jake was saying, excited about the future. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think looking forward, these are still going to be pillars of our team, you know, in the next few years. So when that does happen, when we, you know, enter the 2021 free agent class and you know, we're looking at adding a huge impact player to our team, those are things that we can be looking at and being like, yeah, we have OG, still have Van Vliet, like, and those are going to be key pieces, I think, to securing one of those players and being really competitive when the playoffs roll around that year.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can add just one thing before we go to the MVP MIP section, this is going to be a tough analogy to kind of bridge, but just kind of follow along with what I'm trying to say. In the New York Knicks video, me and Aiden talked about how when you're trying to bring a superstar to a team, you want to have a foundation that attracts a superstar to come to win. For example, the Brooklyn Nets, this is the example I used in the video when me and Aiden were talking about it. The Brooklyn Nets before they had Kyrie or KD, made the playoffs with Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, you know, like Dinwiddie, all these kind of like Joe Harris, all these Brooklyn Nets guys, they made the playoffs. And I could be wrong about this, but I think they beat the Sixers in a few games in that playoff series. And so like when you're a free agent, like, you know, all the guys Kale just named, and you're looking at the list of teams that you could go to, and you look at this team in Toronto where we don't have an arrogant leader. We have 4 guys that will just ride and die for the organization winning something. We have unbelievably good young talent that can develop around you. And our max player is okay taking a back seat. He's already shown that when a superstar comes to the team, he's okay to take a back seat. And in fact, that's where we saw him excel as a player. So like the Raptors, I mean, they've already got it, but they continue to just build this great like foundation to build upon while moving forward into free agency. And I think that's something that we can always be excited that we have as an organization, where you look at other ones like, I don't know, like let's say Detroit before their draft. There's no foundation there. Now there is. But let's say if you look at them like last season, right? You have old Blake Griffin, old Derrick Rose. Like there's nothing to build upon, where the Raptors do have something to build upon. And I think that's something that, you know, superstars actually really, really care about, because I know I would if I was an NBA superstar.
Yeah, I totally agree. There is something I did want to ask you guys what you think about this before we move on. And it's the James Harden thing. Like I'm sure you guys have heard, like less so than teams like the Sixers and the Nets, obviously, but like the Raptors have been in some James Harden trade rumors. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Like obviously it would require a lot to give up. And in some of those pieces, I personally wouldn't want to give up, but I think there are ways that we could get him. But even if you take that out of the equation, what would you guys think about acquiring James Harden?
Do one of you guys want to go first, or I can go?
I'll go because I've thought about this a little bit as well. So like, let me preface this by saying that like there are issues with trading for James Harden, as we all know. James Harden, he doesn't fit into like sort of the system and culture that we have on our team, and we would have to give up a lot to get him. That being said, like there are pros to it that I wouldn't be opposed to. Like if we had to give up a guy like we would have to give up Siakam for Harden. That's just kind of a given. But if Harden would be able to come to the team and give us that kind of star power that we would need to be competitive in the East, you never know. Like I think you put James Harden on any team that's already like sort of competitive in the East, and they could come out of the conference. And once you get to the finals, anything could happen. So I think those are the kind of like, especially as a smaller organization, when you get to this stage where you're competitive, but you're not like, wow, the Toronto Raptors are the best team in the Eastern Conference. Those are kind of the big splash moves that you kind of sort of need to take the risk and make to win. And we saw that with Kawhi, and I think it would be a similar sort of move to try to do.
Agree.
Yeah, I think like I see the benefit of it. I'm not that into it because I don't think that James Harden really fits in very well with the culture of the Toronto Raptors. And I think what we would have to do to get him would be like blow up what we have and what we've built. And again, I know what you're saying, Kale, about the concept of having to make risks to be successful, and we would have to give up something in order to like get that Kawhi caliber player to help us win. But I think that there are other options that we could do with the current core that we have that might benefit us better in the long run than blowing it up and getting James Harden.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally understand what both of you are saying. The way I look at it is I understand the sentiment of just going for the superstar. I understand that, like, that's kind of, look what happened with Kawhi. But the difference is that with Kawhi, we only had to give DeRozan, which I know seems like quite a bit. Like he was kind of like our franchise guy, but it actually isn't that much in like the grand scheme of what Kawhi is worth on the market. that was an anomaly situation where we were able to obtain a superstar and keep our core together. If we traded for James Harden, we would be giving away not only Siakam, but also OG, unquestionably. That's what he's worth. The Rockets wouldn't take less than that. And if it's not OG, it's going to be like somehow like we can't trade Fred, I guess, because he just signed. But it'll be another very, very important member of our team. And the problem with this is, I think, that Harden's a very good basketball player, obviously. He's amazing. But I don't know if Harden, without our core of players, is good enough to get us out of the East this year. I don't know if he is. And if that's not the case, where with Kawhi, the risk we were taking was much less because the benefit was winning, but the risk was we still have everyone. Like, yeah, we lost DeRozan, but then you just get Kawhi, and that's a 1-for-1 switch that anyone and their mother would make, right? So we'd be sacrificing what we've built in Toronto through the draft and through like years of building for a few years with Harden. And the other thing about Harden is Harden's shown that, like, what if it doesn't work out in Toronto for a few seasons? He's going to be like, I want out. And then we're SOL, right? Then we're really shit out of luck, because then like Harden's just going to leave. We have no core. And I like James Harden a lot, but I don't think he's good enough to get us past a healthy Brooklyn. I don't think he's good enough potentially to get us past a Milwaukee at full strength that is just without our core and only Harden. I just don't know. So I personally would like the Raptors to not trade for James Harden.
Yeah, that's a great point that you're making there. Just really quick there. I know you wanted to make a point, Kale, but I just want to say I think it's a great point that Harden on his own, what you have to give up to get him. I think that transaction, the move would be to be more competitive in the East, and I don't think Harden alone would do that without Siakam and OG. So it's a great point. I think wait on the 2021 free agent market where you don't have to give up as much. I agree.
Yeah, you guys hit the nail on the head there. You've convinced me. Like, we'd have to, I guess, if we blew up our entire core, what would just stop us from being the Houston Rockets of the Eastern Conference and just like kind of like floating around being probably almost as good as we are now. I was more referring to a situation where OG's the guy that I wouldn't really want to give up, because I think that OG is just valuable to our team. But yeah, we're kind of just rambling on about the Harden thing. But overall, I do agree with your point.
Yeah, and the tricky thing is, I mean, obviously the Harden, I mean, I believe everything I just said and I still stick with it. It's so hard when you hear your team in Harden rumors not to let your mind kind of whirl into a situation where you actually have Harden and like your team is like pushing for the Eastern Conference Finals, right? Like that's a tough thing not to weave your mind into, but you need to kind of, look at it from a impartial and kind of like realistic point of view of what we'd have to give up. In the final few minutes here, does anyone just kind of want to, I already said one of mine, but my MVP Raptor for this coming season coming up is Kyle Lowry. What can I even say about it? He's still our leader. Like, he brings a certain energy to our team that maybe he won't be our best player, but by God, he will be our most valuable one, because he still brings that kind of, leadership, man. Like, there's, I'm not going to ramble about it in too many other ways to say it. He's our leader. And by that point, I think he is our most valuable player. And for our most improved player, I think it's OG, because like, for all the reasons I just said, he said in an interview, he's going to start working off the dribble to like create his own shots. And as Aiden said, he's one of the best wing defenders in the league. So I think he's going to take a big step. And if you didn't watch our most improved player award video, I was thinking about writing one for OG. I ended up not doing that, but the case is there for him to win most improved player in the whole NBA, not only on the Raptors. So those are my two things. And Kale, do you have two that you want to point out?
You literally just said my exact two, but for MVP, I agree. Kyle Lowry is currently our most valuable player, but I think that Pascal Siakam will have to become our most valuable player in order for us to kind of exceed the expectations that we've been discussing throughout this video. Siakam's going to have to sort of take steps forward and learn from what has happened in the bubble and that sort of like tough stretch that he had, and really just step into a star role on the team for us to be extremely successful. My most improved player is also OG Anunoby. I actually saw interesting statistic, like right before this video. OG ranks in the 94th percentile of all isolation defenders in the entire NBA, which is like 14th in the league, directly behind Kawhi Leonard. So like nothing more can even be said for the value that he brings to our defense. And as you said before, I've watched these interviews with Nick Nurse. OG has apparently taken gigantic strides in his offensive game this year, and I think he's going to just be an even more crucial part of our team.
Lucas, do you have anything for your two guys?
Not too much to add. My pick for MVP, obviously I'm not taking anything away from what Kyle Lowry brings to the Raptors, because that goes without saying. He's our heart and soul and our leader. But I think that Siakam is going to be our MVP this year, and it's simply because I think his individual success this season is going to be the most influential on where the Raptors finish in the standings. I think their success is going to hinge and live and die by whether or not Pascal Siakam can become that guy. And that's why I think he's going to be the most valuable player on the Raptors. And also I think we're all probably going to agree on this. The most improved is OG Anunoby, and that's because he's the only real guy on the radar for the NBA's most improved player anyway. And also his defensive game is already elite, but his offensive game has a lot of room to improve. And I think if he can do that, then he can put up the numbers and have the impact on the Raptors season that will warrant that award.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll just give mine here. I'm not going to say too much differently from what you've said. My pick from the beginning was going to be Siakam, just kind of what we were saying, what I said before about, and what Lucas just said exactly, is that if the Raptors are going to, if they're going to make a push in the playoffs, it's going to be because Pascal Siakam is their best player. So he would be my pick for MVP. Kyle Lowry, of course, we're not going to be able to do it without him either, but Siakam needs to continue to take those steps forward. As far as most improved player, I don't think you can say anyone else than OG in terms of who is going to be the most improved player that's actually going to make a significant impact. But I will shout out one of my favorite role players on the team, Matt Thomas. I feel like if he gets more minutes, he could be a serious candidate for most improved in terms of where he was last year, because I think he can be a very, very nice player that comes in and just hits 3-pointers. He could be kind of like what Duncan Robinson is for the Heat. If they give him that role, I feel like he could be that, because he is just an excellent shooter. And so, if we are crafting a kind of team around the Heat, we have very similar cultures, I would say. So I think, that he could be a big piece to a team that let's hope makes a championship run in the next few years.
Yeah.
One more most improved player honorable mention that I want to make is Slim Duck. I think he could possibly put together a little candidacy for it, just because of the openings and the opportunities that are now available at center. And who knows? I'm not saying he's my pick, but I'm saying it's possible that he could make some big strides this season. Just want to shout out Slim Duck there.
Yeah. Absolutely, both of those guys. And the thing about Matty Ice, Aiden, that no one really talks about or gives him credit for other than Raptors fans, is he's kind of a good defender too. Low key, Matty Ice runs around the floor and interrupts passes and deflects balls, and the guy plays with such a high motor.
He's got a lot of energy.
He really does. And he's running around the key at all times, waiting to get that corner three. Matty Ice is a great one for that, because maybe we're not top. It depends how you define most improved. But if you're talking about just from where they were at last year to where they could go, Matty Ice could improve more than anyone on our team, technically, in one season stretch. So, Nick Nurse loves him. Raptors fans love him. And God knows Jack Armstrong loves him, because he gets to yell, "Buckets!" way more often. So, yeah, thank you all for coming on the show today. And thanks, everyone, for listening. Go Raps, go. And we'll see you next time.